Jeffrey cuts the flesh from this dead body and he puts the flesh in a garbage bag. He takes the bones and he wraps the bones up in a regular bag and then just uses a sledgehammer to crush all the bones up into, I guess, maybe like a powder or a fine dust. Hello and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time seeing my beautiful chocolate face, my name is Ryan Harrington, and here I discuss true crime stories as well as strange stories that happen to be true. Today, we will be talking about Jeffrey Dahmer, aka J-Dub, what they called him in prison. They didn't call him that. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. Jeffrey was born May 21st, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Parents said that he had a pretty normal childhood, but his siblings would sort of disagree, and he would disagree as well. Jeffrey said that his mother was greedy and that she would always argue with his father, her husband, and that she always wanted attention. She dealt with depression sometimes, and she even tried to commit suicide. Jeffrey's father was gone a lot because of schooling. He was like getting a degree, some degrees, a degree. Jeffrey's father was gone a lot. So when he came home, his mother, now I kind of understand that his mother naturally wanted most of his attention. So I guess the kids, she didn't want to fight for attention with the kids. I'm guessing that's what he meant with that. They said that he had a pretty normal and happy childhood until the age of 4 when he had to have emergency surgery for a double hernia at the age of 4. Then after that, he was just different. One teacher even thought that he was being neglected or being abused at some point because he was so different. But after investigation, nothing really came from that. Growing up, Jeffrey started to like dead animals and bugs. And at some point, he even started to collect roadkill, just like dead animals on the side of the street. He's like, hey, I need that. And he would just pick it up and just take it home. Jeffrey would take these dead animals to the shed in his backyard, and there he would cut them up and dismember them and dissect them just to see what was on the inside. There was one story where Jeffrey found a dog that had been hit by a car, roadkill. He found a dog that was roadkill. He took it home, cut off its head, and nailed the body to the shed in the backyard, and then took the head of the dog that he cut off and he put it on like a wooden stake in the backyard somewhere. I would be so mad if I came home and if I was the dad, if I came home and saw that. Who put this dog head right here? Who's gonna clean this up? In 1966, they moved to Doylestown, Ohio, where his mother gave birth to her second son, his little brother. Now, his mother gave Jeffrey the opportunity to name his younger brother, and he chose the name of David. In 1968, the whole family, they were having chicken for dinner, and they were just sitting down, regular dinner, when Jeffrey was like, hey, Dad, how do you preserve these bones? Now, Jeffrey was a socially awkward kid, and his father knew that, so he took this, I guess, curiosity as a father-son bonding moment, and he showed him how to preserve these bones using bleach, like a bleach solution, because his father was like a chemist, so that's what he was getting his degree in. So I'm pretty sure at this time he already got his degree, because it's been like 8 years since he was born. So I'm pretty sure if he doesn't have his degree by now, then I don't know, you need to hang it up, be a farmer or something. Now, years will go on. When Jeffrey was in high school, his classmates would say that he would bring beer and liquor to class and he would hide it in the lining of his jacket. His classmates said that he would drink before, during, and after school. So Jeffrey's out here, a 14-year-old living the life of like a 38-year-old divorced man who can't see his kids on the weekend. At 14, what are you drinking for? What are you stressed about? You better get it together, man. I didn't even start drinking until I was 26, 25, 26. Now, also during puberty around this time, this is when Jeffrey said he discovered that he was gay. He had a small relationship with another boy, and he would often have fantasies about controlling and dominating a male submissive. In 1977, Jeff's grades were declining rapidly, and it was because of the drinking. Also because maybe his mother and his father, their marriage wasn't working. They tried counseling, but it just didn't work. So Jeffrey's father ended up leaving the house. A year later, in 1978, Jeffrey graduated high school. Now, his mother, she had full custody of David. So she took David and went to just like another family member's house, and she just stayed there. So she just left Jeff, and because he's 18, she just left him in the house to fend for himself at 18. Now 18 is the legal age, but come on, man, 18. On June 18th, 1978, Jeffrey was driving and he saw a hitchhiker, a handsome guy. So he pulled over and he was like, hey, you want to come over to my house? You know, we can hang out, drink some beer, listen to some music. I don't know what the popular music was at that time. I don't know, the Migos, 50 Cent. Hey, you want to listen to some music and then we'll, you know, just hang out? The guy was like, sure. So Jeff picks up the guy, they drive home, they're listening to music, hanging out, you know, doing some regular guy stuff. It was all fine and dandy until the guy said that he was ready to leave. Now this really upset Jeffrey. So Jeffrey took a 10-pound dumbbell, hit him over the head. While he wasn't expecting it, he just hit him over the head. And then once he was passed out, Jeffrey strangled him until he died. That's not the worst. That is the worst part. After that, Jeffrey masturbated over his dead body. And this excited Jeffrey. This made him feel good. I guess he felt empowered. I don't know. But this was his very first kill. Spoiler alert, it wouldn't be his last. So at some point, Jeffrey's father had a brand new boo, like fiance. He was about to get married. So he goes back to the house I don't really know why he went back to the house, but he discovered that Jeffrey was living alone, there in the house alone. So he thought it would be a good idea to take Jeff and put him in school. He said, look, you're gonna go to school and I will pay for college and I will pay for the first year. I'll pay for all of your college, but this first year, just so you'll know that I'm serious. So he pays for the first year and Jeffrey's now in college. Now, Jeffrey chooses the University of Ohio State, and there he managed to get a 0.45 GPA. I don't even know how that's possible. He got a 0.45 GPA. And after 3 months, Jeffrey's like, this isn't for me. I'm out of here. And he leaves. Jeffrey's father still isn't giving up on him, so he, not coerced, but he just encouraged him to join the army. So Jeffrey joins the army as a medical specialist. Then he later served in Germany as a combat medic. Now, if you have a 0.45, you're pretty dumb. So I don't know how he got to be a combat medical anything. Jeffrey's peers in the military said that he was a regular soldier and, you know, nothing special. He really didn't stand out. But 2 soldiers said that Jeffrey raped them while they're in Germany. One said that Jeffrey raped him multiple times over a 17-month period. The other one said that he felt that Jeffrey had drugged and raped him. He was pretty sure about this at this time. In 1981, Jeffrey was deemed as unsuitable for the military because of his alcohol abuse, so he was kicked out. So they also gave him a free plane ticket anywhere he wanted to go. Jeffrey chose Florida. Once in Florida, he found work at a local restaurant and then rented a room in a hotel that was close by to the restaurant. So Jeffrey is spending all of his money from the restaurant on alcohol. And during this time, he gets kicked out of his hotel. So with his back against the wall, he has nothing else to do, no money, nowhere to stay. He calls his father and his father's fiance back in Ohio. They're probably married now. But he calls his father and his father's lady and asks could he come back to live with them. They agreed, so Jeffrey is on his way back to Ohio. Once there, his father gave Jeffrey some just around the house chores to do just to keep him busy, to keep his body moving, keep his spirits up, and letting him know that it's going to be okay. But Jeffrey still had a drinking problem. And at one point, he was arrested for drunken and disorderly conduct, and he was fined $60 and had a suspended 10-day jail suspension. Suspended. If it's suspended, then what? His father sees that he really isn't changing. I mean, he's doing the chores, but he still has this problem. Jeffrey needs a little bit more help. So he decides to send him to Wisconsin, where his grandmother stays. So he goes back to Wisconsin, where his grandmother is. Here, Jeffrey seems to be doing good. He says that he felt like his grandmother really, really loved him, and he would do odd jobs around the house. He would go to church. He even got a job at a blood plasma bank. And he stayed there for 9 months until he was fired. Jeffrey was fired. In 1985, Jeffrey started attending gay bathhouses. Now, for those of you who don't know, a bathhouse is pretty much a brothel, but for men. So women have brothels where you can go and like have sex with the women. Guys, they have the same thing. It's just called a bathhouse. Like they don't take baths or anything. It's just called that. So there, Jeffrey would meet these guys and then he would sleep with them, take them back to his grandmother's place and sleep with them. But he would complain because he said that the men would talk too much and they would move too much. So instead of just being a regular person and being like, hey man, can you keep it down? I'm trying to do my thing. Jeffrey would lace their drinks with sleeping pills and then he would just rape them. I don't know where he got the sleeping pills from. Like you don't have any money. You got fired from your blood plasma job. So where are you getting this money from to buy these sleeping pills? I don't know. Now on November 20th, 1987, Jeffrey met a young man. He was about 25 years old at the bar. He invited this young man to come back to his grandmother's house, which they did. Jeffrey said he had no plans of killing him, but he was gonna drug and rape him. That is I'm laughing because that's a terrible thing to tell somebody. Like, hey, I wasn't gonna kill him. I was gonna drug him and rape him, but I wasn't gonna kill him though. Did you write that down? Like, that's such a crazy thing to tell, I guess, cops or a reporter, whoever he told this to. That's a weird thing. Like that's better. I wasn't gonna kill him. I was gonna drug and rape him, yeah, but I wasn't gonna kill him. The next morning, Jeffrey found the man lying under him and his chest was caved in. It was bruised up severely. It was black and it was blue and the guy had blood coming out of his mouth. Jeffrey had bruises and scratches all over his arms. And he said he didn't recall what happened at all. Jeffrey later told the officers that, quote, I couldn't believe this happened, end quote. Like, come on, man. You know what you did. Nobody just kills them. Nobody beats someone up and then doesn't remember anything. You scratches him. You caved a man's chest in. You don't believe that? You don't know what happened with that? Jeffrey buys a large suitcase and stuffs the body inside of it and then just leaves it out in the open at his grandmother's house for a week. It's just there. It's just out in the open. It's probably not open, but it's just the dead body in the suitcase is just there out in the open. Now Jeffrey cuts the flesh from this dead body and he puts the flesh in a garbage bag. He takes the bones and he wraps the bones up in a regular bag and then just uses a sledgehammer to crush all the bones up into, I guess, maybe like a powder or fine dust. Now Jeffrey wants the head, so he keeps the head and then throws all the remaining, he just throws it in the trash. So 2 weeks later, he takes the head and he wants to preserve it. So he puts the head into a mixture of Soilex and bleach. Soilex is another type of cleaning material. So he does this to preserve the skull, but he has the mixture off, so then the skull becomes too brittle and then it breaks. So now he has to start the entire process all over again of finding another victim. And yeah. Now Jeffrey found most of his victims in bars and gay bathhouses. Once he found them, he would take them back to his grandmother's house, which is where he would drug them with the sleeping pills and then just strangle them. So strangulation was his method of choice for killing. So 2 weeks later, Jeffrey meets a 14-year-old Native American young boy who was also a sex worker. Now Jeffrey said, hey, for $50, will you come back to my place and pose just for nude pictures? No sex. I just want you to pose for these nude pictures and I'll give you $50. Now, once back at Jeffrey's house, they actually do engage in sex. And then, of course, Jeffrey drugs him with the pills and the guy passes out, or the young man passes out, and then Jeffrey strangles him and kills him. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that Jeffrey can come back to dismember this young man's body. But again, he makes the mixture for the solution for keeping the skull. He makes it wrong again. So the skull falls apart. So now he has to start all over again. In March of 1994, Jeffrey meets a 22-year-old young man at a bar. He's like, hey, I'll give you $50. Just $50 if you come. Just come and hang out with me. Just come and chill with me. I'm lonely. I don't know. He said something like that. The guy agrees, and then he goes back to Jeff's house where Jeffrey gives him the sleeping pill drink, and then he strangles him and kills him. But this time, Jeffrey performs oral sex on this dead young man's body. Then he dismembers this body in less than 24 hours. So the first killings, it would take him about 2 weeks or a week or something like that. I don't know why, maybe because of work or he just didn't have time. But this night, after he performed oral sex on the body, he immediately starts to dismember this body. But unlike the other killings, Jeffrey didn't want to keep this man's skull, and he said it was because the man wasn't attractive enough to do so. If that was the case, then why even invite him? Like, why even invite him back to your place if he's not even that good looking? I kind of get it, because sometimes when you go out to a club and you dance with somebody all night, they look good, but then once those lights come on, you're like, ugh, ugh. On April 23rd, Jeffrey has another man down into his grandmother's basement, but this time his plans are messed up because his grandmother is calling down to him, like from upstairs. She's like, and Jeffrey, or I don't know, however old people sound, like, Jeffrey. So Jeffrey knows that his grandmother knows that somebody else is down there with him. But the guy's already knocked out from the sleeping drink. So Jeffrey just picks him up, carries him upstairs, puts him in the car, and then drops him off at the local general hospital. In September of 1988, Jeffrey's grandmother sort of kicks Jeffrey out of the house because she doesn't like the fact that he's always bringing just random guys over. And she says that it smells really bad in the basement and in the garage. It smells really, really bad. So during this time, Jeffrey had found another job working at a chocolate factory. So now that he's working and he has money saved up, and I guess he's feeling better about himself, so he's not quitting every job or drinking as much, he's able to keep this job and then save up money, and he moves out and finds his own one-bedroom apartment. Once Jeffrey moves into his apartment, he gets arrested the very next day because he was caught trying to lure a 13-year-old boy into he lured a 13-year-old boy into his apartment, and then he drugged him, and then he was sexually assaulting this boy. And somehow somebody found out, and then the cops showed up. They're like, that's wrong, you're under arrest. A couple of months later, in January of 1989, he was convicted of second-degree sexual assault and enticing a minor. Now, I don't know if he went to jail for this, because as soon as this was over, he moved back in with his grandmother and then hit the gay bars again, like without even skipping a beat. He just head straight to the gay bars. Now, this is when he finds a 24-year-old aspiring model at the bar, and he takes him back to his grandmother's place. Now, Jeffrey said before he even took him back to his grandmother's house that he wasn't looking to kill him or like anybody, but this young man just walked up at the end of the night, towards the end of the night, and just started randomly talking to Jeffrey. So after they get back to his grandmother's house, of course, Jeffrey drugged and raped this young man. Now, he placed this young man into his grandmother's bathtub and then did his routine of dismembering the victim. Now, Jeffrey found this victim exceptionally beautiful, and this was the first victim whose body parts he permanently kept. So Jeffrey preserved the man's head and his penis, and he kept it in a jar at his job at the chocolate factory. Can you believe that? So he kept the head and the man's, wedding bells in his work locker at the chocolate factory. I'm not laughing. I'm laughing because who thinks of something? This is absurd. This is strange. At the chocolate factory. So remember that second degree aggravated sexual assault for the minor? So the sentencing comes up, and Jeffrey gets 5 years of probation, and he also has to register as a sex offender, which is ridiculous. If you do something, you need jail time. I know people who have done less but have jail time and like 10 years of probation. But this was back then, so it might be a little bit different. No, even still, that's just common. Whatever. I'm too invested. Jeffrey moved into a $300 a month apartment in a bad crime area in Milwaukee. And this is when he this is when, I don't know, he had some conversations with a 32-year-old sex worker and promised him $50 to come back to his apartment for sex. Here, he drugged and strangled this victim. But then the very next day, he went out and he bought a Polaroid camera, and he came back and he took pictures. He placed the victim in different poses, and then he took pictures before dismembering this victim. Now, Jeffrey would boil the arms, legs, and pelvis into a metal pot. Then he rinsed off the bones in the sink. Then he dissolved the remainder of the skeleton in a large drum that is filled with acid. He later spray painted the skull and then placed it alongside his previous victim's skull in a metal filing cabinet. In June 1990, Jeffrey lured a 27-year-old acquaintance back to his place where he drugged and strangled this victim as well. Jeffrey took the skeleton and he placed it in the freezer for months, hoping that it wouldn't retain any moisture. But then he placed the skull in the oven and the oven made the skull explode, so that was a waste. Jeffrey's next victim was a 22-year-old male, of course. He lured back to his place, and when Jeffrey tried to perform oral sex on him, he was stopped and told that that would cost extra. But this time was different because Jeffrey didn't have any more sleeping pills, so he couldn't drug him and do his normal routine. So Jeffrey decided just to go up and slit his throat. Just boom. I'm just gonna cut your throat. So Jeffrey posed the body in these different poses again, and then he was taking pictures with the body. And then he placed the body in the bathtub and cut off the head. And then he said he was talking to the cut off head while he was dismembering the rest of the body, that he would just kiss the head and just caress it while he's cutting up the rest of the body. This is whew. After that, he wrapped up the rest of the body and he placed it in the refrigerator to eat it later. September 24th, he lured another victim to his place, but he said he wasn't really attracted to this one, so he just killed him and then threw away the entire body. I don't really know how he did it, but he just got rid of the entire body. Probably dissolved it in the acid. He probably dissolved it in the solution. That's the easiest way to do it. I don't know, I'm not a murderer. On April 7th, Jeffrey saw a 19-year-old boy walking to get a key cut, like a key made. So he lured him into his apartment, drugged him, and this time what he did while he was drugged, he drilled a hole into his skull and he poured hydrochloric acid inside of his head. According to Jeffrey, this 19-year-old young man wakes up, and this excited Jeffrey because Jeffrey wanted a submissive, pretty much slave that he could control. So I'm guessing that's why he poured the acid into his skull. When the boy wakes up, he says, "I have a headache. What time is it?" So he didn't even know that something was going. He didn't even know that he had a hole in his head, like an extra hole in his head from old Jeffrey. But Jeffrey, this wasn't good enough for Jeffrey. So Jeffrey drugs him again and then strangles him and kills him. I don't understand why he didn't maybe try it again, or what was the point of doing that? Now Jeffrey wanted to keep this skull because it had the drill hole in it, and I guess it was a memento of his first experiment for drilling and pouring acid in someone's skull. But so he soaked it in water for weeks, but it didn't work. So he just threw it away. Times go by and his neighbors are starting to complain to the landlord that these really foul smells are coming from Jeffrey's apartment, plus these loud noises, and some even complain about hearing a chainsaw. So the landlord calls up Jeffrey, and Jeffrey says, I'm so sorry, my refrigerator went out, so that smell is just all the rotting food that's going to waste. So the landlord's like, all right, whatever, man, just, I don't know, do something about the smell, throw the food away, and knock it off with the chainsaws and the noise. Boom. But later on, the neighbors call again. So the landlord calls Jeff again and is like, hey, people are still complaining about this smell, man. What's going on with this smell? What you doing in there? So Jeffrey's like, oh, I'm sorry, I had these tropical fish, and then these fish had died, which is where all of them died. So these fish had died, so that's what the smell is. On May 26, 1991, Jeffrey finds a 14-year-old boy that he tries to lure back to his apartment. Now, Jeffrey would say that this young man was very reluctant, but after some talking and coercing, that he convinced the young man to come back to his place. Now, Jeffrey gives him the sleeping pills, and as he's sort of dozing out, Jeffrey leads him to his bedroom. So the boy's kind of woozing and he's walking to the bedroom, but he sees a dead body from one of Jeffrey's killings like a couple of days earlier. He sort of tries to freak out, but the drugs take a hold of him, and then he just passes out. Now, before Jeffrey does anything to this body, he leaves and he goes to grab some more beer, because that's what you do when you're about to kill somebody. You get a little thirsty, so you need a buzz. So you go out and you grab some beer. When he comes back, Jeffrey can see this young man is outside and he's surrounded by 3 older women trying to get him some help or trying to figure out what's going on. Now, Jeffrey quickly runs up and is like, oh, this is just my friend. He's drunk. I'm just going to take him back up to my apartment. He just needs to sleep it off or whatever he says, something like that. But the women had already called the police. So now they're kind of talking to Jeffrey, trying to postpone him until the police actually get there to really see what's going on. When the police actually get there, Jeffrey sort of switches up his story. He says that this is my 19-year-old boyfriend and he's just drunk and I'm just trying to get him upstairs so he can sleep it off. So the cop's like, okay. One of the women pulled the officer to a side and was like, hey, there's something not right here. Like, this guy's naked and he's clearly, something's going on. He tried to get away when Jeffrey tried to take him upstairs and he's bleeding from like his butt, like he's bleeding from his butt. So there's something seriously going on. The officer said, lady, this is a quote, butt out, shut the hell up, and don't interfere. End quote. So Jeffrey has the photos that he took of that young man earlier. So he's like, look, officer, this is my boyfriend, because he posed for these naked pictures. Like, this is him right here. You can clearly see that he wants to be here. I took these pictures. So yeah, everything's fine. The officers agree and they just let him go. Once Jeffrey got him upstairs, he knocked him out again and he poured the hydrochloric acid inside of his head. But this time he didn't wake up like the first guy. So he just completely died. So the very next day, Jeffrey calls out of work because he had this man to dismember plus the man that he killed, I guess 4 days now, because at this time frame, 4 days ago, he killed that guy. So he calls out of work so he could dismember these 2 bodies that he has in his place. Jeffrey would lure and kill 3 more men, and each time he would call out of work, and all of this just calling out led to Jeffrey being fired from his job. July 22nd, 1991, Jeffrey approaches 3 men and he asks them, hey, do any of you want to just hang out, drink beers, and pretty much just keep me company? And if you do, I'll give you $100. So one of the men took Jeffrey up on this offer and he heads back to his apartment. The man would later say that as soon as he opens the door, he's just smacked with this horrendous smell. But he goes in anyway. I don't know why. So he's looking around and he sees that Jeffrey has these empty hydrochloric acid bottles just everywhere. He's like, what's up with all these acid bottles, man? What are you doing in here? So they end up in Jeff's room. And as soon as he walk in, the stench is even more pungent. And he looks around and he can see that this 57-gallon drum, he's like, that's where that stench is coming from. I know it's coming from that place. So somehow or another, Jeffrey ends up placing his head on the man's chest. And he says to the man, I'm going to rip your heart out of your chest. Like, who says that? That's not pillow talk. But that's what Jeffrey said to the man. When the man hears this, he's thinking like, I need to make my escape because this guy's nuts. Something's not wrong. Something's not right with this guy. I would have thought that as soon as I walked in and smelled that smell. What you been cooking in here, man? There's no food that smells like this. Chitlins don't even smell like this. So this man, he was like, hey, let me use your bathroom. So Jeffrey's like, yeah, whatever, it's right over there. He goes to the bathroom. There's no window in the bathroom. So he comes back out. So now they're kind of chilling in the living room section. So he waits a little bit. He's like, hey, let me use your bathroom again. So Jeffrey's like, yeah, man, you know where it is. You just came from there. So he goes in there and he's thinking of a plan. How am I gonna escape? What am I gonna do next? So when he walks out, he sees that Jeffrey isn't paying attention. So what does he do? He cocks that right hand all the way back and punches Jeffrey as hard as he can. And then he just runs out. Just runs out of the place. He runs out of the place and he's like screaming and foiling his arms every which way around. And then he sees 2 cops and he runs up to these 2 cops. Now he has a handcuff on. I forgot to tell you that Jeffrey somehow put the Houdini on him and he was able to slip a handcuff on his wrist. But they weren't like this, but he just had one handcuff on his wrist. So when he goes up to the officers and try to get the handcuff removed, their key doesn't work because Jeffrey was using like an off-brand handcuff, or I don't know, maybe who knows where he got it. But their key didn't work with his handcuffs. So the 2 men take the man back to Jeffrey's apartment, and Jeffrey admits it. He's like, yeah, I did it. Okay, let me go get the key so I can take the handcuff off of him. While Jeffrey was trying to go get the key, he's trying to keep the police officers out of his room. But the police officer's like, hey, like, step back, bro. I got it. So one of the officers walk into the room and they see a drawer that sort of open, and they can see the Polaroids that Jeffrey was taking, and on the Polaroids were just different stages of dismemberment of different bodies. So this cop's like, whoa. The officer also noticed that the decor or the scenery of the background of the Polaroids match Jeff's apartment. So he takes the Polaroids out to his partner. He's like, hey Johnson, take a gander at this. So once Jeffrey sees that they have the Polaroids, he immediately starts to fight in order to get away. But of course they subdue him, and now he's under arrest. Now they have him under arrest, so now they call for backup. Once backup get there, this is what they find. One severed head in the refrigerator and 4 severed heads in the kitchen, just hidden in there. 7 skulls, 2 hearts, some arm muscle in a bag, an entire torso, a bag of human organs, and human flesh that is stuck to the ice in the bottom of the freezer. They also find 2 skeletons, a pair of severed hands, a mummified scalp, and 2 severed and preserved penises. So they're still snooping around, still looking around. They're like, all right, let's pop this 57-gallon drum open. Let's see what's in here. And inside there were 3 male torsos just in there, dissolving. Jeffrey had a total of 74 pictures that were detailing the dismemberment of the murders. On July 23rd, 1991, he was brought in police custody and he was questioned, which is where he admitted to killing 16 young men since 1987. On January 30th, his trial began, and his trial lasted for 2 weeks, and he was sentenced to life in prison plus 70 years. They were making sure this guy was never getting out. No parole. We're going to give you life. And on top of that, we're going to give you another 70 years, which is pretty much like another life sentence. We're going to give you this one, and we're going to give you some more. Just to make sure. His first year in prison, he was he was placed in solitary confinement for his own safety, because a lot of the inmates knew and heard of the case. So they wanted to get him. After that first year, he was transferred to general population. Then on November 28th, 1994, Jeffrey was found on the gym floor of the prison with severe head and facial wounds. He was still alive, so they rushed him to the hospital, but he was pronounced dead an hour later. I always wonder, do you think that doctors really try to help? I know they have to take what is it called, the oath, the Hippocratic oath, saying that no matter who it is, that they'll try to help him. But if you heard this case, would you really try to help this guy? Jeffrey got these wounds because there was another man serving life in prison who attacked Jeff. The story was there was a guard who was watching over Jeffrey, the man who killed Jeff, and then there was another inmate. So there are 3 inmates down cleaning up this area. So the guard leaves, and then this man, something happens. I read a few different stories, so I'm not sure, so I'm not just gonna speculate what happened, but something happened, and then this man killed Jeff, and then he walked over a little bit, and then he killed the other man too. When the man who killed Jeffrey and the other inmate was questioned, he said because God told him to do it. He also stated that Jeffrey didn't scream or make any noises. He just took it. He just took the beating. I don't know, maybe he thought he deserved it or something. I don't know. And that is the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, Jeffrey's younger brother, David, changed his name altogether, so you probably can't even find him. You probably have to do some serious digging to figure out what he changed his name to. Jeffrey's father would later on go to write a book about, I guess, his time with Jeffrey as a little boy. And I don't know the name of the book, so you can look it up if you want to. But thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already done so, please like this video, share it with somebody, and then subscribe to the channel, and be sure to hit that notification bell. That is it, and I will see you on another one.